Last weekend, a group of friends and I got together for a day of hobbying madness. While most of the others were either playing card games or working on their Gundams, I thought it would be a great opportunity to try something new with my Warhammer painting. For the past few months, I've been really trying to hunker down and master the fundamentals by cutting out any kind of shortcuts like washes or speed paints. And this all culminated with me going to Golden Demon at Adepticon in March. If you want to see how that whole project went, I'll link the video right here. Painting like this with all cylinders firing was an amazing learning experience, but it was also very slow and very intense. I wanted to just kind of let loose this weekend and have a little fun, but even more than that, I wanted to do something fast, really fast, finish it just in that afternoon. While figuring out how I was going to paint something so much quicker than I normally would, it dawned on me. Fuck it, I'm gonna have to try Slapchop, aren't I? I've been pretty reluctant to try methods like Slapchop, both because I didn't want to jump on the already very over-encumbered bandwagon, but also because so many people were talking about it as if it were a way to avoid painting instead of having fun with it. And that runs counter to everything that this channel is about. We should be enjoying the process of painting our minis, and ideally, bettering ourselves as artists along the way. But this presents us with a big problem. How do we balance speed and quality? I've neglected the speed aspect of my painting for far too long, as my sea of unpainted guardsmen can attest to. My absolute favorite parts of painting are building up highlights and volumes, adding texture, weathering, and all the tiny little final details, all of which are at the tail end of the painting process. Maybe we can use the underlying principles of what makes Slapchop work to get to the fun parts of painting faster. Well, Saturday rolled around and the Crude Hunter from the Blackstone Fortress box was very narrowly in the lead in the community polls that I took. In fact, it was a single vote on the Patreon poll that broke the tie. So I packed up my models, my gear, and when I got to my friend's house, I set up my little mobile painting and filming station. Slapchop is fundamentally just a form of underpainting, or grisaille if you want to get fancy. But nobody said underpainting has to just be grayscale. In fact, that's one of the biggest problems with Slapchop. Contrast paints aren't strong enough to meaningfully cover over black, leaving you with desaturated shadow tones and ultimately a lifeless model. In real life, shadows are basically never black. I talked about this in my kit bash and paint guide for Battlebarge, which you can see here. More often, shadows are going to reflect the environment. On a sunny day, this usually means the sky, giving shadows a distinctly blue tint. So we're base coating the whole model in a mix of dark blue and Payne's gray. Now, I'm definitely not the first person to have thought to base coat in something other than black for Slapchop. I know Ninjon at the very least has also suggested this, but most often I see people recommending to base coat in a darker version of the majority color of the model. But I think my method here is going to be better than that, since we're integrating the idea of an environmental mother color into the model. Next, we need to dry brush up our highlights. This is one aspect I really like about underpainting. Since we aren't using something like a wash, which just settles into recesses, we actually have the opportunity to establish volumetric highlights instead. If that's an unfamiliar term for you, all it means is we're going to highlight according to the shapes of the model, rather than just hitting raised surfaces like with edge highlighting. Many of the other big painting YouTubers have talked about this topic before, so if you go looking, I'm sure you will find a good explanation out there. But if you'd rather hear it from me, let me know. I could definitely make a video on that topic. Now, you may have noticed that I'm not actually dry brushing up through gray like you normally might with Slapchop. This is a little experiment I'm doing, with the idea being to establish a cool to warm color gradient across the model. I'll talk a bit about how I thought this went at the end when we have our final finished product. Otherwise, we're doing this pretty much as standard, going up to a very bright off-white. I did also come back in with some of the base coat color mixed with contrast medium to just reinforce some of the shadows. I know this video has been pretty front-loaded with theory, but now we're going to make some real progress on the model. Applying the contrast paint was very quick and easy, no surprise there, that's literally the point of this technique. As for my color choices, I kept my palette very limited. This wasn't some kind of 1 billion IQ color theory thing though, I just don't have that many contrast paints, and they're all pretty earthy colors. The main exception to this was the green that I used for the skin tone. I don't actually have any green contrast paints, so instead I took Vallejo Russian green and mixed it with some contrast medium. This functioned basically identically to the contrast paints. At this point, pretty much everything I've left unpainted are gonna be metallics, and I'm gonna handle those towards the end so as not to contaminate my palette or water cup with those shiny flakes. The last non-metallic part of the model that we need to hit is his very spiky hair. Given how earthy and restrained the colors on the rest of the model are, my instinct was to go bold and colorful on the head spines, so I slapped down some purple. I liked the direction this was going in, but at the urging of some of my friends, they said I needed some red as well. So I decided to do a quick blue to red gradient across the spines. To make this as fast as possible, I applied the red and blue pretty liberally and blended them while the paint was still wet. If you haven't tried wet blending, give it a shot. It's much easier than you might think, and it is very quick. The spines only took a few minutes, and they really give that punch of color that the model needed. Next up, the metallics. For the most part, I just covered everything in a dark gunmetal color, with a few exceptions. The barrel of the gun I did in a bright silver, and then the bands around the gun that connect the stock to the barrel are in a bronze color. In the spirit of keeping things speedy, I just washed all the metallics in Agrax Earthshade, and then gave them a round of simple highlights in a medium silver color with a few scratches with the bright silver. In the more traditional Slapchop method, you might call it done right here. It's definitely more than adequate in terms of tabletop ready. But for me, this is where the fun really begins. We have the opportunity to take this model from just okay to great. Our undershading provided a wonderful foundation to work with, but I want to push the highlights on certain surfaces even further, particularly the skin, the leather, and the poncho. This final stage is going to better define the shapes, bring out the vibrancy in the colors, and smooth out the overall finish. While putting in all this extra work may seem counterintuitive from the perspective of speed painting, remember, this is the part that I enjoy the most. And we got to this point much faster than I otherwise would have. You can see here that I'm just coming in with some pale green and building up some thin layers on the parts of the skin that would be receiving the most light. I'm not really worrying about getting clean lines or anything like that. Wider brush strokes and gentle stippling will do just fine. On the poncho, I believe I first hit it with Skeleton Horde, but that was just far too desaturated for me, so I pushed it into a more mustardy yellow using Nasdrig yellow. Then I proceeded to do some more highlighting, building up a few additional layers of some pale yellows. Notice that I'm still keeping my paint very thin in order to help build up those volumes, and I'm making a lot of long, scratchy strokes with the brush. Varying your brush strokes between surfaces is an easy way to give the illusion of different materials with different textures. For the leather bits, I brought in some more saturated orange browns, and then started building up from there. I'm using a method I really like for leather, where I'm using a lot of semi-randomized scratchy marks that crisscross over each other. I think of this as a form of cross-hatching, where we're achieving two main effects. Firstly, we're building up volumes through layers of progressive highlights, but we're also building in the illusion of a leather patina, where each layer of these scratchy marks comes across as signs of age and wear. How far you want to go with the detailing is ultimately up to you. I was having fun painting away while talking with my friends, and so I just kept on going until the day was over. I added a bunch of details off camera, like the lenses, the bony spines and fingernails, as well as this wood grain pattern on the stock of the gun. The day was drawing down, so I went ahead and finished things off by painting the eyes by filling the surrounding eye sockets with some dark red-brown and hitting the eye itself with some yellow. Apparently, Kroot don't have irises or pupils, so a single color was enough. Alright, so I'm back home. Let's take a look at what I was able to achieve on Saturday. I'm pretty happy with how it came out. This all took around 5.5 hours. That may not sound all that fast to many of you, but for me, it is positively blistering. Not to mention, I was also spending time talking with my friends, eating pizza, and petting their dogs. So the actual painting time was probably a fair bit less than that. I did notice a couple spots that I missed and a few mistakes, which I'm just going to clean up real quick. Not to mention, we still need to paint the base. Let's wrap this up with some closing thoughts. Did I enjoy using the underpainting method? Yes, more than I thought I would. It really did a fantastic job of cutting out the early tedium of the painting process, and it also provided a really solid foundation to work from. I also think that my idea of using a cool color as the base worked out very well. The resulting model has more color depth than it has any right to, given how quick I was able to finish it. However, my idea to dry brush up through warm, creamy tones, I think ended up backfiring a little bit. Because of just how thin the contrast paints are, I actually think that you really need that bright white underneath to get the full vibrance out of them. This was especially true on the green skin. I had to add a lot of yellow to my highlight colors to give it that vibrance and liveliness. Otherwise, it just looked kind of dead and gray. The major thing about this technique that I did not like was just how much texture was left behind by the dry brushing. Now, maybe that's a flaw in my technique and it will get better as I practice my dry brushing, but I'd also be very interested in putting this technique head to head with a more traditional wash-based method and then compare the results both on quality and speed. Let me know down in the comments if you'd be interested in a video like that. That's it for today, everyone. I appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed what you saw here, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. It really helps boost the channel. I try to engage regularly with the community, so if you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them down below. If you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel and helping me make more videos like this one, consider checking out my Patreon, where you can see behind the scenes content, join the channel Discord, see additional painting tutorials, get personal coaching, and so much more. And keep in mind that not all of the Patreon content is paywalled, some of it is free. Notably, when I do polls to decide future video content, I post them both on the YouTube community tab and on the Patreon. But votes on the Patreon are worth triple, so if you really want to make an impact, do it there. I also have a Ko-fi page where you can make one-time donations or purchase services like model coaching or one-on-one painting lessons. My Ko-fi page is also the best place to contact me if you wanted to commission a painted model. Thanks again, everyone, and until next time, I'll see you on the tabletop.